As per the name, the Redhead Murders is the name given to the 6 to 11 unsolved murders of red-headed women along major highways in the United States in the 1980s. These victims were often prostitutes or hitchhikers, and many were never identified due to an inability to find a family to verify their identities. Due to the locations of the victims' bodies, many speculated that the murderer was a truck driver. Only 3 of the victims believed to be related at the time had red hair, while the others were strawberry blonde or dark-haired ladies. Many other factors also varied between the murders, including that some victims were found clothed and others not, and some had been sexually assaulted or experienced sexual intercourse shortly before their deaths, while others had not. Several other unsolved deaths similar to these murders, in terms of the method of the killing, the placement of the bodies near a highway, or the red hair color of the victim, have been linked to the Redhead Murders. In 2018, students enrolled in a sociology class at Elizabethton High School studied the case with the aid of their instructor. They described the subject as a white male born between 1936 and 1962, aged between 23 and 49 in 1985, who was likely a commercial trucker frequenting Interstate 40. They estimated his height and weight to be 5 foot 9 inch 6'2" and 180 to 270 pounds, respectively. His work was likely based in or near the city of Knoxville, Tennessee.
On March 5, 1972, 2 high school students who were riding motorcycles in a rural area outside of Santa Rosa, California, saw what they thought was a mannequin lying face down in a creek bed. She was Kim Allen, a 19-year-old Santa Rosa junior college student who had gone missing while trying to hitchhike from her job to her home the day before. She'd been raped and slowly strangled for up to 30 minutes before her killer threw her body about 20 feet down a steep embankment to the creek bed where she'd later be found. For the next several years, Santa Rosa would struggle to come to grips with a series of murders that all looked chillingly alike. Young female victims who went missing while hitchhiking, exact murder locations unknown, but their bodies found nude and cast away like garbage down steep embankments of rural roads around the Santa Rosa area. Some of the victims had single earrings missing. Some had been raped, some strangled. Some were disposed of in the exact same areas as earlier victims. It was clear that serial killer was at work between the bustling freeway and the quiet country roads. Then, after the disappearances and killings seemed to stop in Santa Rosa, more victims started to pile up from and in other areas. San Francisco, Marysville, Sacramento, Monterey. All told, 54 unsolved homicides from 1970 to 2006 taunt police to find links to the same killer. The one connection to all of the victims seemed to be Highway 101, the large highway connecting Northern and Southern California. And a society that wasn't yet terrified of hitchhiking. It is believed that the killer may have been the Zodiac Killer.
There was a series of 8 axe murders from 1884 to 1885 in Austin. According to Texas Monthly, 7 women, 5 black, 2 white, and 1 black man were murdered. Additionally, 6 women and 2 men were seriously injured. All the victims were attacked indoors while asleep in their beds. 5 of the women were dragged, unconscious but still alive, and killed outdoors. 3 of the women were severely mutilated while outdoors. All the victims were posed in a similar manner. 6 of the murdered women had a sharp object inserted into their ears. Only one of those arrested, James Phillips, was convicted. He was found guilty of murdering his wife, but the conviction was later overturned. The African American community and some practitioners of voodoo believed the killer was a white man who had magic powers that enabled him to become invisible, as no dogs outside or in fenced yards adjacent to locations where murders occurred were heard to bark or raise any alarm. The series of murders stopped and additional police officers were hired. Rewards were offered and citizens formed a vigilance committee to patrol the streets at night. Contemporary newspapers reported that the murderers had apparently fled the area, as no more murders were officially attributed to the killer by the authorities. He is sometimes claimed to be America's first serial killer.
Retired Detective Kevin Gannon insists the drowning deaths of dozens of college-aged men across America since the late 90s are the work of a serial killer gang, not mere accidents. The drowned men that Gannon and Anthony Duarte call victims were all young, athletic and academic achievers. They were all reportedly found dead after a night out drinking. They started appearing in clusters across the country starting 1997. A graffiti of a smiley face was reportedly found near the bodies. And 9 of them were drawn with horns. However, several reiterated the original conclusion that the deaths were accidental drownings of inebriated men, and stated that no smiley face symbols were found in connection with any of these cases. The Center for Homicide Research in Minneapolis, Minnesota, published a research brief that also attempted to scientifically refute the theory. In March 2009, Lee Gilbertson, a criminal justice faculty member at St. Cloud State University, voiced his support for the theory on an episode of Larry King Live in which the alleged murders were discussed. In 2019, a new article appeared on the Daily Beast that highlighted the theory advanced over the years that a serial killer is abducting and murdering subjects of the previously classified age group.
The killer is credited with attacking 8 people within 10 weeks, 5 of whom were killed. The first 2 victims, Jimmy Hollis and Mary Larry, survived. The first double murder, which involved Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore, happened 4 weeks later. The second double homicide, involving Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker, occurred exactly 3 weeks from the first murders. The Texas Rangers came in to investigate, including the famous M.T. Lone Wolf Gonzalez. Finally, almost exactly 3 weeks later, Virgil Starks was killed and his wife, Katie, was severely wounded. The murders sent the town of Texarkana into a state of panic throughout the summer. At dusk, city inhabitants heavily armed themselves and locked themselves indoors while police patrolled streets and neighborhoods. Although many businesses lost customers at night, stores sold out of guns, ammunition, locks, and many other protective devices. Several rumors began to spread, including that the killer was caught, or that a third and even fourth double homicide had been committed. Most of the town hid in fear inside their houses or hotels, sometimes even leaving town. Some youths took matters into their own hands by trying to bait the phantom so they could kill him. After 3 months of no more phantom attacks, the Texas Rangers slowly and quietly left town to keep the phantom from believing he was safe to strike again.
A young serial killer stalked San Francisco's gay community in the mid-1970s. He would sketch strangers in bars, strike up conversations, leave with those strangers and then, police say, stab them to death. He became known as the Doodler. His last known victim died in the summer of 1975. The decomposing body was found near the 16th tee of a picturesque golf course that borders the Pacific Ocean. The victim's pants were unzipped. His face was eaten by maggots. Police released a sketch of a suspect a few months later. They repeatedly questioned one man. But the Doodler was never caught. It is believed that the Doodler killed up to 14 people. A consistent method used in several of the killings was stabbing the victims in the front and back of their bodies. Police theorized that the victims had all died after meeting with the suspect near the locations where their bodies were recovered. Police initially believed there could have been as many as 3 different perpetrators during early stages of the investigation. In February 2019, police offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the killer and released a revised sketch showing what he could look like 4 decades later.
The Saw Killer of Hanover is the name of an unidentified German serial killer, who's supposedly responsible for murdering and dismembering at least 4 women and 2 men, whose body parts were found in Hanover and the surrounding area in the 1970s. None of the victims have been identified, and the case is also referred to as the found corpses of Hanover. A total of 13 body parts were found in the years from 1975 to 1977, including a severed forearm at a power plant, a lower body in the city park, and a torso on a dirt road. The common pattern from all the found corpses is that the death toll couldn't be determined for most victims. They were only dead for a short time before discovery and were cut up with a saw or surgical instrument. The whereabouts of the rest of the bodies remain unknown. The body parts were always disposed of on Saturdays in conspicuous places, so that they could be found by passers-by easily. According to Torso, the offender did not have profound anatomical knowledge, with the cuts being severed at the joints suggesting it might be the work of a butcher. It is striking that the perpetrators had no aspirations to hide body parts of the victims, but even with a certain exhibitionist tendency, within 2 kilometers of the city near Maschsee, he dumped them not far from where the police headquarters of Hanover were located.
An unidentified Russian serial killer that goes by the name of the Volga Maniac murdered 32 single elderly women, aged 75 to 90 years old, who resided in public apartment buildings in the Volga and Ural federal districts, Russia. According to investigators, the perpetrator infiltrated the apartment, pretending to be an employee of HOA or the social service. All victims were strangled with improvised items, for example, a bathroom robe belt. After the murders, the criminal would steal money and valuables from the apartment. But the investigators believe that stealing pensioners' money is not a priority for the killer. The first 9 murders took place in Kazan. One of the victims survived, but could not describe the criminal. Similar murders took place in Ulyanovsk, Nizhny Novgorod, Izhevsk, Perm, 2 murders in April 2012, and Samara, 2 murders in May 2012. By August 1, 2012, there were 18 murders. Between September 25 and 27, 2012, the last 3 murders were committed in Ufa. On September 26, 2012, the perpetrator was captured on a CCTV camera lens at the entrance of one of his victims' homes. Thanks to this, a facial composite was compiled, which coincided the image from the video. On May 25, 2017, investigators suggested that the offender was a native of Tatarstan and studied in one of Kazan's schools. Currently, the investigation continues.
Between 2001 and 2005, 11 women were buried by an unknown assailant in an arroyo bank on Albuquerque's West Mesa, in an undeveloped area within city limits. Satellite imagery taken between 2003 and 2005 shows tire marks and patches of disturbed soils in the area where the remains were recovered. By 2006, development had encroached on the area, and soon after, the site was disturbed, buried, and platted for residential development. All of the West Mesa bone collectors' victims fall between the ages of 15 and 32. Fit a specific profile, were suspected to be involved in the Albuquerque drug scene, and worked as prostitutes. Rather than a mass grave, the bodies were found scattered across an empty plot of land. When law enforcement officials began searching for other bodies strewn across the plot of land in West Mesa, they had compiled a list of 20 potential victims. All of those women had been missing for some time, and they all shared characteristics with the known victims. Of that list, 11 were found buried in the serial killer's dumping ground. And 3 others were luckily found still alive. However, the remaining 6, all of whom remain unnamed even though their pictures are available, are still missing, and might have fallen prey to the murderer as well. Continues.
The Zodiac Killer is one of America's most infamous serial killers. During the 1960s and 1970s, Zodiac murdered at least 5 people, often couples in secluded areas, near San Francisco. The media has been captivated by the Zodiac Killer because of his relationship with the media. Zodiac began sending coded messages taunting police to various newspapers very soon after his first murder. He signed these letters with a circle with a plus sign over it, his symbol. He infamously sent a cipher that said, "This is the Zodiac speaking. By the way, have you cracked the last cipher I sent you? My name is." This was followed by a series of 13 symbols that were supposed to be his name, encoded. To this day, this code has not been cracked. He claimed to love killing because man is the most dangerous game, and once threatened to massacre a dozen people unless the Chronicle printed his message. The paper published the letter. The Zodiac also threatened to wipe out an entire school bus by shooting out the front tire so he could pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out. After taunting the police and the public with nearly 24 communiques, he seemed to vanish in the late 1970s.